views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Welcome to Bronxtalk. Tonight is part 2 of our brief series with City Council members to help us kick off the new year. Tonight's guest is the chair of the Council's Public Safety Committee, so crime and policing and keeping people safe will certainly be on our agenda. She's also part of a new task force to address gangs and crime in public housing. We'll talk about that too. There's also the ongoing problem of homelessness in the city, big questions about the Jerome Avenue study, which is largely in her district, housing, and a range of other Bronx and city issues that we have on the table for tonight. If you'd like to join the conversation on this and other issues, then give us a ring, 718-960-7261, or send an email to bronxtalk@bronxnet.org, or post them on our Facebook page, and we'll read them on the air during a future edition of the program. For the here and now, she is the council member in the 16th City Council District, which includes the Bronx neighborhoods of the West Bronx, Highbridge, Morrisania, and Melrose. Welcome back to Bronxtalk, Councilmember Vanessa Gibson.
Thank you. It's good to be here again. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you. I hope we all have a great New Year in the Bronx. Let's start with crime and policing. I guess the biggest issue that came over the last couple of weeks was this spat between former Commissioner Ray Kelly and current Commissioner Bill Bratton. Are you concerned that the numbers that we're seeing as regards crime in New York and in the Bronx are not accurate?
No, I'm not at all. I fully believe and have confidence in Commissioner Bratton and the NYPD, knowing that there has been no changing or shifting of classification of crime. There was only a couple of years ago a new state law on strangulation and how that's classified. But aside from that, under Kelly, under Safer, formerly under Bratton, there's been no change. I am very supportive of the work they have been doing, and recognizing in the past year of 2015, overall crime was down almost 2%, and in the past 2 years it's almost 5.8%. Obviously, we know we still have a lot of challenges around guns, around gangs and crews, drugs. Obviously, we want to continue to focus on community-based policing, smart policing, equity and enforcement. Very important to all of us across the city of New York, and truly every New Yorker wants to be safe.
Before we leave that one specific topic, and then we're going to get into a lot of the other things that you just mentioned, what do you think that was about? Why Ray Kelly brought that up?
It's interesting. I mean, a lot of asked that question. I really don't know. I didn't serve in the council when Ray Kelly was commissioner, but I do know, unfortunately, there tends to be a lot of leaders, past and present, that just like to, flex muscle and really, really highlight some of the things that they had done. I don't remember a time under Commissioner Kelly's tenure where there was a question as to the classification of crime data. And so, of course, I question that, and certainly I appreciate that not only did the commissioner remain forceful, but he really supported his officers that are doing a great job every day of fighting crime.
I'm just curious about this before we get into some of the specifics. Becoming the chair of the Public Safety Committee, have you learned something? Has it changed your perception of either how the NYPD operates or what it takes to keep people safe? I think viewers would be curious to know.
Wow, what a question.
Well, that's my job,
I can say in the past 2 years of serving as chair of the Committee on Public Safety, the first woman and person of color to ever chair this committee, I'm grateful for the leadership of our speaker, Melissa Mark-Viverito. And I have truly learned so much about the police department. I have tried to insulate myself as much as I can to understand the life of an everyday officer, speaking at roll call, doing doing ride-alongs. Recently, I joined cops to execute a search warrant, really understanding what cops go through every day. The neighborhood approach to policing, the mental health, the crisis intervention, the domestic violence, the traffic enforcement, school safety. I've really tried to work with all of the chiefs and the commissioner, community affairs, to really understand what police officers go through every day. So in the past 2 years under Commissioner Bratton, under my tenure as chair of the committee, I really think the police department has been doing a great job. I will say that my colleagues and I agree that they are listening a lot more. We have never been invited to headquarters as much as we have now to listen to the police department about initiatives and new programs and partnerships. And for the first time in a long time, it's gratifying to know we don't always agree. There are a lot of issues we still struggle on, but I will say that at least there's a listening ear.
You know, I've known you for many years, even prior to your being a city council member when you were in the assembly. You certainly sound more passionate and more well-versed. This is a commentary, it's not a question, on police and crime issues, and I think it speaks well for you and your interest and intensity into it. Along with that, murders are up, although crime is down generally. Right. Do you believe that the elimination of stop and frisk under Bratton has been a good thing, and is it a factor anywhere in this equation of crime going down or murders going up?
So I would say, just for the public's knowledge, that stop and frisk still does exist. It has been significantly reduced because of recognizing that the past practice of stop and frisk was racial, it was discriminatory, and it did nothing to combat crime. So you had young men of color, predominantly Latino and African American men, that were stopped and frisked by police officers. It didn't amount to arrests nor convictions. And we as a city had to say to ourselves, what can we do to not only drive crime down, but make sure that young men of color still felt safe? So we still use the practice of stop and frisk, please understand, but it has been significantly reduced because we, the commissioner and the mayor, recognize that we could no longer practice stop and frisk in its current form. We had to change the way we do community policing, and that's what we have done.
So how do you assess the relationship between police and communities right now? There's such resentment over the deaths that have been in police custody. I don't have to list them, not only here in New York, but across the nation.
Right.
On the other hand, much like the somewhat transformation that you did, I think there's greater awareness than ever before that, you know, community people have to rely on the police force.
Right.
Certainly we all have sympathy for the horrible assassinations of police officers in our city and across the country. So how do you assess right now where the relationship is at, not only in your district, but across the city with communities and the police?
Well, I would say that it has improved a lot. I will say we still have a long way to go, particularly in communities where there has been a fractured relationship, minority communities, low-income communities, immigrant communities. And I will say that because of the police department and community residents really working together, residents understanding that they can be a part of the solution and not the problem, they can call 911 when there is an emergency, and they can really work with police officers to drive crime down. The fact that in the city of New York, it's a small percentage of bad apples that make it bad for everyone. And I think residents are starting to become more aware of that. Through new initiatives like the Neighborhood Community Coordination Officers, the NCO program, which is something the police department has now launched and they're expanding throughout the city, and other forms of community-based policing, I think we are on the right direction and we're going in the right way. We do have a long way to go. Obviously, nationwide, there's a conversation around criminal justice reform. There are still too many young Black and Latino men who are killed while in police custody by police officers using excessive force. So we know we still have a lot of cases. Every time there's a case of an Eric Garner and a Kai Gurley or anyone else, Sandra Bland, that happens across the nation, it sets us back. But we as a city cannot allow these incidents to set us back because we have to look at the bigger picture. We want to make sure there is accountability and police officers are engaging in best practices that is fair, but we also want to make sure that we are looking at the bigger picture and making sure that programs like the NCO and other community programs are still being implemented.
You have talked on this show and elsewhere about the idea of training, and many people say, well, wait a minute. Police officers, if they were trained better, they would have operated a little bit differently. They would have had different attitudes. I guess two-part question. Number one, what do we need to do for training? And then if two, is there a financial cost to that, and where is that money going to come from?
Absolutely. So last November, after the unfortunate tragic death of Eric Garner on Staten Island, Police Commissioner Bratton instituted a thorough 3-day in-service enhanced training for every police officer, 35,000 officers that are on patrol. And it cost us about $30 million that the City Council ultimately supported and authorized, because we wanted to make sure that when you talk about police officers, new officers graduating from the academy, that they understand the job and the work that needs to be done. So training, you can never train enough to do your job better and more efficiently. So we did that. 35,000 officers have been trained, $30 million later, and now it's incorporated into the everyday training that every new recruit gets going into the academy. In addition to that, there's been an assortment of other trainings. We have a lot of emotionally distressed persons, mentally ill persons across our city that are also a part of, you know, a lot of the crime that's happening, not necessarily engaging in the crime, but many have mental illnesses. So officers need to be equipped with how to respond to someone who's classified as an EDP, someone who's a jumper, someone who's suicidal. So we also instituted crisis intervention training, which is started with the first 5,000 officers.
When you say we, is that something that came from the council, or something that you know, we as part of the city and the police department?
The first training, the 3-day enhanced training, came from Commissioner Bratton and, you know, the police department, and the City Council obviously supported it. And then the crisis intervention training also from the police department as well.
You've been a supporter, if I remember correctly, of cameras on police officers.
Yes.
Where are we at, and is this a trend that you see happening, taking full force in the city of New York?
We still have the pilot program. We have 60 body cameras throughout 5 commands and 1 PSA across the city. And the Police Foundation provided us with the first startup cost of $50,000 to pay for that. And we had a lot of conversations around privacy, around storage, around what happens if non-police activity is recorded, around the actual mechanism by which an officer has to press the button, around what happens if an officer does not do that. So we are still having a lot of those conversations around storage, and obviously working with a lot of the civil rights advocacy groups and organizations. The police commissioner had recently announced several months ago that the department is looking to expand by 1,000 body cameras. Ultimately, we at the council, I support a universal approach to body cameras. I think it's the right way to go. I think body cameras are neutral observers. I think they can help an officer and a civilian on both sides of the aisle. If someone is accusing an officer, if an officer is accusing a civilian, I think that camera can capture. I also believe that your behavior does change if you know that interaction is being recorded on both sides. It's not the only answer. It's a part of a bigger conversation, and it's certainly important. President Obama is talking about body cameras. We're talking about it across the nation. So I think it's a very important tool that we should institute.
Is there a cost? There is. Excuse me.
Oh, yes,
there is a cost.
Course.
Who's going to bear that cost, or do we know yet? Or
we do not know yet. It's too soon. We're still having conversations, but we're in the midst of a new budget season for FY17.
Do we need more cops?
Right now?
Right now.
I would say that we have 1,000 new cops that started in December. We have a new class that just began in the Academy of 1,300. By the end of this year, we will have 2,000 more officers on the street. We are not yet at the levels that we needed to be prior to 2001, when we had over 40,000. So we're probably around 36, 37,000.
Do you have a sense that if we had more cops, we'd do better? Or since crime is down, frankly, we don't quite need as many police officers?
So I am always a fan of police presence. The resources are very challenging because everyone will argue we need more cops. I do believe that cops are a part of this conversation, but not the only solution. So I would not say that putting a massive amount of cops in one neighborhood is going to solve the problem. You need much more than that. Police presence is important for deterring crime and responding to crime. But for many of us, we have deep-rooted issues in our communities that a lot of times the police cannot respond to, like homelessness, like unemployment, like youth-on-youth crime, like, you know, the growing numbers of young people that are not in school. I mean, a lot of those deep-rooted issues we have to invest programs in and not just rely on the police officers to respond.
And frankly, I think it would not be fair to police officers to expect them to correct all those problems which our society created.
Right.
Which leads us perfectly into this idea of a public housing task force that you, our guest last week, Councilmember Richie Torres and the Bronx Borough President, have engaged in. What do you expect to get out of it? I mean, ultimately, you know, frankly, it's just talk, because whatever has to happen has to come out of the city council and enacted through the police department anyway, or in other, venues. What is this for, and what are you hoping to get out of it?
So first, I'm thankful to be a partner with my borough president and Councilmember Richie Torres as chair of public safety. This Bronx Public Housing Task Force is going to do several things. Number one, it's going to allow us to make sure that Bronx residents in public housing have a real voice. It's challenging working with NYCHA and making sure that the Bronx gets attention and priority. So number one, we are going to work with every community resident leader of PSA 7 and PSA 8 in the Bronx, as well as other developments not covered by the PSA. And we're not only going to work with driving crime down, we're going to deal with domestic violence, which is high in public housing. We're going to deal with community resources like community centers and tenant associations. We're going to focus on tenant patrols, which we used to have in NYCHA and we don't necessarily have.
Things that the police department might benefit from, but they don't have the resource to
address. And then it's also about long-term solutions. So while budgetary community resources are important, we also want to look at policies moving forward, right? So the process to get into public housing and how we can change that, how we can expedite that to deal with the homelessness, how we can deal with some of the quality of life issues that everyday residents deal with that sometimes are not being addressed in an expeditious fashion.
As you know, I was at the gentrification forum yesterday, which was really all surrounding the Jerome Avenue study. For people who don't know, the city is considering rezoning a large swath of Jerome Avenue, which is largely in your district. I guess the main fear that was expressed by the people who were there is the idea of displacement. If there's development, it's not going to include us. Rents will go up, both commercial rents and residential rents, and where do we go? We're going to be thrown out. Other people will do better, but not us. Do the people in your district have a reason to be afraid?
Absolutely. And I say that to all of my city officials. My residents that live in my district have been living there for many years, and they have a right to be concerned because with a lot of the broken promises over the years, a lot of displacement that has happened across the city of New York, this Jerome study plan is the first plan in which we are developing any part of the Bronx for quite some time. So we have to do it, and we have to get it right. We want to make sure that there are investments made in terms of capital investments in my schools and mass transit, my open space, my parks, but also the affordability. We use that word very loosely, but we want to make sure affordability applies to the people it needs to apply to. The average AMI in my district is less than $30,000 for a family of 4. So we're talking about working families, working poor, and those that are certainly at or below the federal poverty line. So with any new project, and obviously East New York is moving and they're ahead of Jerome. So we're looking at East New York and what happened in that plan, and we're saying to ourselves, what can we do to not only make our plan better, but to be a model of what development is like and what real engagement is like. The planning department has had lots of working groups and meetings, lots of town halls with community organizations like CASA and many others. Residents need to be a part of this process because this is truly going to be a plan that's driven by the community.
So if they are having these meetings, we've publicized them here.
Absolutely.
We've done any number of forums.
Yes, we have.
We've had any number of dialogues, but the people still clearly, from what I saw yesterday, firmly believe they're being left out of the process and that this is a runaway train, and regardless of what they say, regardless of the number of times that housing and the City Department of Planning meets with people, that they're going to do what they do anyway. How can they be assured that maybe there will be some real input or there will be real listening by the city? How does that work?
So I believe there has been real listening by the city. While we don't have the official plan just yet on Jerome, there has been a lot of input on community resources, on economic development, on jobs, on housing, different elements of this Jerome plan. People are fearful because they see what has happened in other parts of the city.
They have very
and
good
rightfully
reason
so.
To be fearful,
rightfully so. But the one thing I say, as their council member, as their voice at City Hall, I will not support any project that does not benefit our community, our shared community. The reality is we have to embrace change. Change is going to happen whether we like it or not. So we have to use this opportunity as a chance to say, if change is going to happen, change should happen for us, for my seniors, for my foster care kids, for my children, for my working families. And that's what the direction is that we're taking on this plan.
The auto businesses that are there,
yes.
they certainly feel targeted.
Yes.
They feel very vulnerable. We had history with that with the Bronx Terminal Market.
Yes.
We had people who were suppliers to bodegas, and some stayed, some did okay, some simply went. And frankly, there was probably a cost because our bodegas throughout the Bronx and throughout the city didn't have that kind of resource. Are you concerned about the auto merchants in this same way?
Yes, of course, I am. I want to make sure we maintain as much of the auto industry as we can along Jerome Avenue. I also want to make sure that we're working with a lot of our auto merchants. The challenge has always been is how do you communicate with them? Because many of the employees are not the owners. A lot of the Jerome corridor are renters. They're not owners. So there has been a lot of challenge the city has had in getting to Jerome. So we have incorporated community organizations like the Auto Merchants Association. Many of my leaders in the district have been working because they have the ability to communicate. There's always been a fear. No one wants to talk to government officials. No one wants to talk to the city. So we have to get over that. I want to make sure if anyone wants to stay on Jerome, they're allowed to stay. If they choose to relocate and leave, then that is their choice. But I don't want anyone to feel like they're being pushed and priced out.
Historically, city council leadership and generally the body of the city council listens to the home council member. Do you expect, because you've been very vocal and standing, it sounds like pretty strong in this case, do you expect that your colleagues will follow your lead in this case when it comes? You do. Mm-hmm. Let's go to the phone. Bob, our buddy Bob from Riverdale is with us. Hi, Bob. Nice to have you.
Councilwoman Gibson.
Good evening.
The question Gary mentioned at the beginning was the reduction of the number of police officers.
Yes.
And we see this in more red light cameras and even speeding cameras that are set up by this previous mayor and this mayor who's increased them. Now, is a speed camera a real deterrent to someone who's speeding because people are saying that they get 3 or 4 or 5 of the same tickets? Or is it just, I mean, is it a deterrent as a police officer would when they pulled you over and went to court?
It's an
or is it just
question.
a city tax?
Number one, it could be a tax. Number two, it would be a way of kind of pretending that we're really saving money. Who knows? Bob, thank you.
So I would say, obviously, speed cameras are meant to deter and prevent bad behavior, to reduce the number of drivers who are, violating the law. Obviously, it is a lot of revenue for the city of New York. When I was an assembly member, we passed the first pilot of 140 cameras, speed cameras around schools, because we saw that there were too many drivers speeding in and around schools.
Let me just, believe it or not, you're going to hate that I'm going to say we're almost out of time, but is this a trend that we need to do more of, do less of, or just leave it the way it is now?
I'm a big fan of cameras, so I'm not saying that we should replace cameras with police officers. Absolutely not. I think they're a complement to the work police officers are doing.
I was part of a task force, frankly, that you had called to your office a little while back after the Highbridge Life Center closed. You've expressed an interest in saying, well, wait a minute, we don't have enough community activities for our kids, et cetera, et cetera. What happens now? That was a very serious loss to your district, and is there a chance to replace some of those programs?
Yes, there is. We are working, myself and Assemblywoman LaToya Joyner and local officials working with the borough president. Because we are upon a new budget season, we have an opportunity to identify a new community organization that can replace the work the Highbridge Life Center did, which was a lot of nursing classes, GED, ESL, immigration, citizenship classes that they had, and find a location in Highbridge. I'm very concerned. Highbridge, very, very important to me. The loss of the Life Center was devastating. Many residents truly upset. We also had a lot of residents from northern Manhattan that came as well. So we're going to be working this year to see if we can identify an organization and give them the funding to do so.
Without enough time to really get into this question, but the idea of homelessness seems to, center into your district. More shelters, you get all the shelters, you get the benefit of all the failed policies, frankly. Is the line finally drawn on shelters in your neighborhood? What do we do now?
You mean in terms of more shelters in my district?
Yes, in other words.
Well, I certainly hope I do not get not one more shelter. I have enough. I'm saturated. I have shelters for homeless families, for domestic violence victims. We are doing our best in the city to tackle homelessness. It is a never-ending issue. 60,000 families.
We're almost out of time.
Not
Is the
good.
mayor on the right track, or does he have more figuring to do?
We're on the right track with Homestat, but we have to realize and see if it's working. But Homestat is a good step.
You said when you sat down here with me that we really need an hour, and that's true.
We do.
Vanessa Gibson,
so much.
Thank you so much for your time tonight, and we will certainly have you back, continue the dialogue. Folks, if you have further questions or comments on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, then email them to us at bronxtalk@bronxnet.org or put them on our Facebook page, and we'll read them on the air during a future edition of our program. Please like the Bronx Talk Facebook page. You can check out our archives at bronxnet.org, and we are on the lower right navigation bar. Now, next week we focus on a Bronx group that completed Roberto Clemente's humanitarian mission in Nicaragua 33 years after his death in 1972. And now, 10 years after that historic act, the Bronx Project Club Clemente has an additional project that will honor the great one we will talk about next week. The week after, the developer who is building housing on a large swath of the South Bronx in a project that has rankled some, Keith Rubenstein of the Cherrett Group, is scheduled to be our guest on January 25th. Then on February 1st, a public school teacher who is retiring after 47 years in a Bronx high school will talk about his career as well as get into what is really going on in Bronx high schools. That will be a show like all our shows that you don't want to miss. Thanks to Dahlia, who's our producer, Shirley, who's our director, to Helen, to Autumn, to the cast of thousands, to you, to the council member. We'll see you next week. Good night.
Me and my boy Matt had it good. He had catnip that was off the hook. But one day, he brings a girl home, and she's allergic to cats. Every sneeze was a nail in my coffin. Now I'm in a shelter. It's decent, but they don't even have Wi-Fi.
Morning, Gary. We are GetSchooled.com. You want a college education, don't you? Gary, financial aid forms. Biology homework, G. What? Picking a college, man. You